This is the meter. Superintendent provides coaching. Members of the public pledge of hat.
Should the assistant superintendent?
Yes.
See, I wouldn't know that because. First
I failed in my duties to perform.
I think that's next month.
Yeah.
Right, it is 7:03 p.m. We'll call to order this regular meeting of the Reading Board of Education for April 5th, 2022. Those watching on YouTube, we have a slightly more primitive setup tonight than usual. So I'll let you know that in person tonight is myself, Chris Parker, Mike Hoffman, Laura Gibbons to my right, Julie Partridge to my left. No members of the board are currently joining remotely. Second item of business is the consent agenda, which is the approval of minutes for February 22nd and March 1st, 2022. I'm going to have to pull both of those with comments on both. For the February 22nd, 2022 minutes, I would suggest that we adopt them with the same revisions that were made in the Region 9 meeting, which is to note misspellings of Petrozelli and Scrofani. Then on page 4, it should read except for a first reading to repeal. On page 5, it should read written release with the town of Easton. On page 6, it should read M. Pempel said it is also the responsibility of the superintendent to look out for the safety of our staff and that she doesn't want to be forgotten, that to be forgotten in our discussions. Are there any other comments on the February 22nd minutes? If there aren't any, we'll look for a motion to approve those as amended. Laura, thank you. Is there a second? Mike, thank you. All in favor? Yeah, motion carries 4-0. With respect to the March 1st, 2022 minutes, would note that in the attendance, Scrofani is misspelled, should be SCRO, and the public comment was from Stephanie Ortegon, ORTEGON, and so that can be corrected a handful of times, which are the. Any other comments on the March 1st minutes from anybody? There aren't, we'll look for a motion to adopt those subject to those revisions. Mike, second. Laura, all in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Brings us to public comment. Any members of the public wishing to be heard? Mr. D'Agostino.
D'Agostino, Glenville Road. So I have two brief comments. The first is that even though everyone knows there ain't no such thing as a free lunch, student lunch this year is without a direct cost to either students or parents. So take advantage of the one free regular student lunch that comes with a milk, because there's no direct cost to you. The federal government's paying for it, and it gives your child an opportunity to get a nutritious lunch and kind of experience the wide array of offerings that are here as part of our lunch experience. The second comment relates to a job opening for recording secretary. The three districts are looking for or seeking additional recording secretaries. So as I see it at Region 9 meetings, if you have mad writing skills, want to learn more about our fascinating district, or just have trouble going to sleep before 11 o'clock, this is the job for you. Please apply. And it takes a lot of patience, and we will test your patience as you try to find the job offering on the website. But if you stick with it and you go through human resources and go through all the tabs, you will eventually find it. And please consider applying. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Other public comments? Seeing none, board member comments? Seeing none, we'll just right on to administrative reports. Dr. McKinn.
Okay, great. First, we're going to hear from Melissa and the RAS principal report.
Good evening, everyone. So this month we have decided to showcase all the wonderful happenings that are occurring in our fine and practical arts classes. And for those of you who don't know what fine and practical arts are, when we were in school, those were specials. We called those music, art, PE, instrumental music, all of those wonderful things. So in art, every student at RAS created a component of a massive sunflower fields mural to promote hope, peace, and unity. A reminder that when we work together, we can achieve harmony. If you have not had an opportunity to see it, you should definitely come and visit RES. It is absolutely gorgeous. In music, grade 3 students have been practicing mindfulness strategies in relation to music that can help them become more aware of their feelings and emotions. Students worked with the book, The ABCs of Feeling, and music by Scott Edgar to identify different emotions and listen to musical selections that correlate with that emotion. In instruments, 3rd and 4th grade strings are continuing to develop their string musical performance skills in the area of reading music notation, tuning, bowing, identifying note names and the correct fingerings, intonation, and counting. Each lesson provides the students the opportunity to demonstrate these skills by playing alone and with others a variety of music. In library, we had a very exciting time in March. All students preschool through grade 4 learned about Bob Shea and listened to his books and practiced how to draw his characters. And on March 10th, students were lucky enough to participate in the Zoom author visit with Bob Shea. PE has been very exciting. They preschool through grade 4 students participated in a circus unit where they had the opportunity to use beam-based PE equipment to develop strength, coordination, balance, and object manipulation. And then our senora, we've been learning lots about los animales. So during the month of March, students from kindergarten through grade 4 learned about los animales. Students spoke about the adjectives to describe them and the habitats where they live. And now they are ready, and we all are ready for La Primavera, spring, and seem excited about the upcoming projects ahead. Any questions?
Yeah, Melissa, I noticed in Megan's report a date certain for the 8th grade recognition ceremony. Do we have a plan on the 4th grade stepping up? Will it still be whenever the last day of school is?
So we have been discussing that. We have been going back and forth regarding either the very last day of school or that Friday before, but we haven't confirmed the date yet.
Usually we try and coordinate with Easton as well, so that Dr. McKinnon and I.
I know Bonnie has been all over having conversations with the other secretaries in the buildings to coordinate so that we don't overlap.
And another question, this is the time of year we start zeroing in on kindergarten enrollment packets and things. Any sense as to how close we're going to be to the projections at this point?
So the projected enrollment was 96. The actual enrollment, oh, I'm sorry, so that's current. So I am not sure. I haven't checked the formal, but I can get back to you. But
That'd be great.
yeah. Thank you.
Okay, Megan?
Good evening. There's lots going on. I just actually printed the board report down in front of me. I realized it was 7 pages, so I'm gonna we are really, really excited to offer our St. Baldrick's event this year after a couple of years of not having it. It was one of those moments where Susan Stewart came to me and she said, St. Baldrick's? And I said, yes, sure, why not? Here we are. So 3 weeks later, we were really happy to see that we raised $10,891 in just 3 short weeks. I'm really fortunate to have a number of staff members that shake their head. The Reading police came over, a few of them shake their head. We think we talked to a few as next year as well. We have 3 students also shake their head, including one very brave student with very long hair. That's we were very impressed by her. We had 5th graders, and all of this is in the board report, but I'll just capture a few things for you. Our 5th graders worked with Ms. Wallen and Ms. Spiteri on their kind words lesson. In our advisory this month, we did a lesson on upstanders and bystanders, where our student council members created videos, which allowed for really great talking points in our classes. Our 5th, we have a couple of fun announcements. Our 5th graders, we had thought maybe we would get to an overnight trip to Nature's Classroom. We know that Easton has been doing it for decades. My younger brothers participated in the Nature's Classroom many moons ago. And we're really excited that our 5th grade is going to go for a day this year. So we're hoping that can lead to more days at Nature's Classroom in the coming years. Our 8th graders are also going to participate in a trip to Brownstone Water Park. Many of them have been before in different summer camps, and it's a really great outdoor experience for them. And we're super excited because we partnered with Helen Keller Middle School, so that's a joint trip and a really great way to bring our 8th grade students from the together before they get there. We have an April recital coming up this Thursday. It's a small group, it's individual performances in a smaller setting. We have our concerts coming up as well as we get to May. The April recital is really more student initiated wish to perform, which we're really excited for. They don't even necessarily need to be taking the class or the instrument that they're performing in for the recital, but it's a really great experience for them. And we begin our planning for our fourth graders transition to John Reed. So we're gonna have the fourth graders come spend a little bit of time here in the morning, and we're planning, and I'll really set dates to move this official, but the plan is to have fourth graders come in the morning, and then that night, welcome parents here for a meeting of fourth grade transition and how to choose the classes that they have in terms of the performing arts as they get ready to come to John Reed. This week at John Reed is our April Spirit Week, which ends with the spring games for grades 5 through 7, which I know everyone looks forward to. And our 8th graders voted to forego their spring games opportunity and wanted to play forward volleyball, which is always a big hit that day before break. And I had the fortunate experience of being in Mr. Kelly's classroom today for his 8th grade robotics tug of war competition. It was pretty amazing to see the robots that the kids had made. I'm happy to say that the all-female team beat some of the boys, so like go women engineers. So it was really exciting to see in our robotics classes, and that's what's going on at John Reed.
Just a general comment, I was really excited to see that there's a joint field trip with Keller. I think the more the middle schoolers, particularly the 8th graders, start working together on things, the better the transition to the big box school.
Yeah, I think we're gonna forego the transition dance this year, but then a part of us also felt like a trip to Brownstone, it gives them more opportunities to interact more, I don't know, without as much pressure maybe, at the water park and some of the events that they have, but maybe. Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll be brief. This is a very busy time for us, especially that, as you know, we are in the process of transitioning students. We have fourth graders that are moving up to John Reed, and then we also have John Reed students that are moving on to the high school. So we spend a lot of time during this month doing those celebrations, if you want to call it, to celebrate getting on to the next level. So also, we're also spending a lot of time with the extended school year. This is the time we start getting ready for those summer months. So we will be making sure that we have our summer school program up and running. We're very fortunate that we have a nice collaboration with the academy programs that are run, because a lot of our kids be taking advantage of those opportunities too. So we're looking to continue that partnership, making sure that our students are taking those events as well. Looking at our numbers, we do see our total for signage, we do see a bit of a drop from 17.9% to 16.8% from last year to this year. But again, these numbers fluctuate depending on, the calls and, the people that move into the district and people who move out of the district. So we just do that for the basis for comparisons. That's really all that I have at this time. So, any questions, please?
Dr. Pearson, you go is further down on the agenda for the climate survey. So we just have Mr. Petrozelli present the budget object summary, our finances.
Sure, thank you. So the budget object summary, as you're aware, we have a spending pause to the chagrin of our granting schools. So I apologize. And I look forward to hearing from you, because we are going line with them when I see a request to go over to see if it's truly discretionary. And I have stopped a few of them. So what I'll do is I'll hit the highlights, because I think we have a pretty good number that's going to segue into our health benefits account of what we have for savings. So again, if we go right down to the bottom of the 100s, which are our salary accounts, we're going to stay with our breakage number at 17,499. So we have $17,499 in breakage, which is an opportunity to us. If we go down to
So that's everything from 102 through 150?
50, yes.
Okay.
If we go down to 251 and 261, the reason why we're negative in the unemployment compensation, as I discussed in prior meetings, that's the state of Connecticut extending it, so we didn't have any money budgeted for that. And that's where, above that, I'm sorry, I want to go back to 240, which is our tuition reimbursement. So I spoke with our HR manager again today, because we looked at this closely, and right now, we're going to take $14,000, seven for each school as an opportunity, and we're going to leave some money in there in case somebody wants to take a spring class, which they're going to get tuition reimbursement. So again, we'll be looking at that monthly to see if we can take any more of that money going forward.
How much you say we're taking?
7,000 a school, so we're going to leave 2,600.
Okay, in that unexpended line, got it.
Yes, per school. Again, the workers' compensation, as in previous meetings, I don't know why we budgeted 60,000, but the expenditures came in at 57, so we have $5,400 of an opportunity there also. We go down to 320, which is professional tech education. We're going to take the 5,900 and the 5,598. So we don't think there's going to be any additional spending there. I want to go down to 330, other professional services, and I just have another sheet open, so if you bear with me a second. If we look at that account, it looks like there's 177 that's unexpended there. I just want to over 60% of the amount budgeted in that line is for special education, and I worked with Jen and her team to see where we can come up with a number. So we don't see any opportunity there for that 60% of the budget at this time. It feels that they're going to spend it all in very detailed data. So we're going to go with that account. And on the other percentage, we're going to take 35,000 of that as an opportunity to take back. I feel as though that's a good number to take back. There is going to be some additional spending there that I'll work with the schools to get a little bit better visibility going forward. But we're going to take 35,000 of that amount as goodness going forward. If you go down again, disposal services, we're going to take the 602. We get down to the lawn care. I want to go down to 424. We all know the story with the lawn care. What I did is I did a little math in the back of the napkin. So I did up that as a risk of 16,500, which is going to go to the other way. They do have some encumbered, but I don't know if that's fully going to cover us till the end of the year. So that's 16,500 to be bad. If we go down,
Is that in addition to the 11 that we're overdrawn by?
no, that's included.
Inclusive,
So I'm
got it.
just bringing the number up to 16,500.
Got it.
The cleaning and repair services, again, the reason why we're so negative is the well situation we have there. But I do think going over this line by line, that we have a $25,000 opportunity there. So we're going to take that as an opportunity.
And so the 25 is coming out of 431.24, which will offset the well expense
Yes.
in 23.
Yeah, and again, this is something I'm watching closely as the requisitions come in and talking to all the schools, so we feel pretty comfortable with that number. We go down to student transportation. We have Eric. So this year we actually budgeted special education transportation and our regular student transportation. They did it all in one line last year. So we're and again, we're looking at this every week. So we have an opportunity of $162,000 there that we feel is very real. Now, again, this is as a component of special education in it. Without getting too much into the details, so this could change, but if things stay steady state for the rest of the year.
So most of that is in relation to it. Most of that is in relation to special ed transportation. The callback. Okay. Can you provide us? Yeah. Why don't we just put a bookmark there? I want to talk about transportation more, but why don't we go down to keep following what you're doing?
Yes. If we go down to We go down to 563, which is tuition guided school again. Talking with the special ed team, we think we have a $30,000 opportunity there. So we're going to take that 30,000 as an opportunity. The tuition of the magnet schools, which is account 565, we're going to take that $1,000 from each school. We go down to instructional supplies. We feel as though we're going to take $10,000. I'm talking combined two schools. I know we're breaking down their school, but combined, we're going to take $10,000. So we're still leaving some monies in there. And again, we'll be watching this as on a weekly basis, but definitely as our meetings come up to if there's any changes there.
It's got 580.
Sorry?
I think you went over 580.
Oh, I did, I apologize. So we're gonna take all the conferences and travel.
The full 23.5 there.
That's right. Actually, Dr. McKay and I were talking about that and we forgot to go back to it. So I'll give you a different total when we get to the bottom. Also, the standardized testing, we're going to use all those funds, so we're not going to take any of the standardized testing. The instructional supplies, again, I think I just wanted, we're going to take $10,000 of that. The non-instructional supplies, we're going to take the 3,200 and 2,700, so we're going to take all of that. We go down to the maintenance supplies, we're going to take 10,000 from one of the schools and 5,000 for the other, just based on our historical spending. Again, we're going to leave some funds there in case they do need anything. We're going to the curriculum supplies, we didn't touch. The computer supplies, 617. We're going to take $1,000 from each school. I am going to look into. I left. If you go down to the heating oil, 624. I got to look into that number a little bit more. I don't know why we still have an expended budget there. The expenditures were all made in August and September. We prepay for our oil, so we might have another additional opportunity of about 32,000. I just haven't had the time to go into. There's not a lot of breadcrumbs there, so I got to really take some time to try to figure that out. But it looks like so for now we can hold that in our back pocket, but for right now, I'm not using that in the calculation. And then again, the textbooks and the periodicals and electricity, I just left that there for now. Again, I'll take another look over the course of the month. We go down to 731. We're going to take all of the equipment, instructional and non-instructional. We're also going to take the furniture and fixtures there, $200 left. And the software, we're going to take all the 11.8 and the 2.9 or 2,900, excuse me. And then in the dues and fees, we're going to take 5,251. So that gives us an opportunity of 442,716. And I want to roll this into a discussion on the health benefits accounts.
That
If you have any questions,
That's 442, and then there's this travel that gets added to it.
I
Do that
it
travel.
was 419. I made the adjustments as we were going through it. I'm on my computer now, on our copy, so it's 442,716.91 is the number we're at right now. We're seeing as an opportunity.
So my transportation question, given the widespread driver shortage and the many routes that are getting canceled every single day, how, I know we are entitled to contractual penalties. The question I have is sort of how hard we're riding the vendor and what the accrued penalties are at this point.
Sure. So that's a working process. By that I mean we saw, I believe that the bill just passed last week, so we've seen a significant increase the past week of drivers being out because I guess there was a law passed by Governor Vermont. I don't know the exact law, but it allows for up to I believe a month of paid leave. I think there are a bunch of drivers that take them not advantage or going out on leave. So that's adding to the past week. I think we've had a lot more bus issues than normal. So what we're doing right now is our business managers and myself are separately looking at the same week and interpreting the contract separately, and then we're gonna come back next Wednesday, see what we come up with, and then if we have further questions on how to interpret the contract, we're hoping maybe to reach out to you, Chris, before I reach out to shipping equipment.
Yeah, I
Just
know
to see
that.
exactly what, you know,
What
I
we're
haven't
entitled
read
to, right.
having read the contract, I know what the dollar figures are, I just don't know at this point if I'm clear on, you know, which one we could go after.
Right. So 2 years ago, when everything shut down, one of the executive orders that the governor issued related to basically holding transportation providers harmless. And we and every other district in the state had negotiated with the transportation providers on a percentage of the contract that we were going to pay, basically to keep bus drivers' paychecks coming, basically a backdoor employment program. But one thing that was helpful at that time was that CASBO cooperated quite a bit, and coordinated quite a bit with respect to what they were seeing in the field and how they were negotiating with the vendors and finding what that sort of fair number might be across the market.
Okay.
I assume without knowing that everybody is dealing with driver shortages. So I assume that there are other folks out there, and I'm just sort of curious if it's a discussion within other business officials with what you're hearing otherwise that they're doing.
So we didn't get into the specifics, but all the other districts, I was on a roundtable last month, and all the other districts are having issues. I would go so far as that I think we've been pretty lucky as a district, as many doubling up of buses and the bus issues that we've had, we've been in a better position than our surrounding towns and other towns in the state. Based on our conversation, there's about 12 or 14 other directors of finance there, so it was a pretty good sample size. But again, we have all the dates and what happened on those dates, so we have all those data points. It's really just us sitting down and figuring out our interpretation of the penalties. So we should have that soon.
That's helpful. Other questions on the budget object summary?
Yes, can we go back up to 330? I didn't quite understand other professional services.
Sure. So 60% of 330 is due to special education. So 60% of the budgeted amount.
Mhm.
So there's no opportunity. They're going to spend 60% of the budgeted amount. So the unexpensed,
So 40% you're putting in the,
we're putting in a
Possible.
portion of what I think is an opportunity of the unexpended of that. So there might still be additional opportunity there. I just didn't want to call it out.
I got that.
There are no other questions. I think you wanted to parlay this into a conversation
Yeah,
about
so-
health insurance.
So the health benefits analysis, you obviously have this from last month because of the timing, we didn't have the information, but we did get the claims number for this. For March, which was 210,280, which is going in the direction that we wanted to go in.
210, huh?
Sorry?
210?
Yes. Yes, and that's a good number. That number's not going to change for March. So what I did, because I know that we've had discussions on this before, so what I did is I actually did a forecast at the end of the year. And what I did is I used 230,000 in claims for the final 3 months. Actually had 250 in there, but I, after talking with our HR manager, we thought that bringing it down to 230 was a more reasonable number and conservative, so we're comfortable with that. And then what I did, as far as we don't have any of the admin fees or anything for this current month, so what I did is I just went and used historic averages, and I feel is all within the reasonable limits. So what I have calculated now is coming in, and this is drawing all the funds out of the 270, 271 account, other than the funds that are going to go into the paid in lieu. So I'm coming about at 120,000 in the hole. Which, if we come with the unexpended amount that we're hoping that we come to, would leave us an end of the year balance or a beginning of the year balance if the board decided to use all those unexpensed funds to fund the health benefit account to the tune of about $320,000.
I'm trying to recall, Dr. McKinnon, a month ago, you had workshopped some of these same numbers, and I thought we were coming out in a better spot than 120K in the red.
I think we were coming in at minus 67,000, right? We budgeted in that equation, we actually put in 250 per month.
That's what I thought, which is why I'm wondering why it's
So it should be a
lower.
little bit better.
So it should be better.
Right,
Um,
that was my recollection, so I'm surprised to see.
It is, I honestly didn't have the time to compare that because that was my recollection too, but
I could pull up-
we're running down to the wire to get there, so I can't do that, but, I did use the model that we're looking at right now and just, like I said, extrapolated it out, so I'm pretty comfortable with the number I just came up with.
So
unless something-
were you offsetting that with employee contributions? Because
I
every
did
month,
use some-
we have premiums coming in that offset that.
Absolutely, and I've used the number, historic average to get there, Chris, so if I'm looking to give you, so employee contributions the past few years, so the past 5 years, 576,581, 495, 460 was last year, and I have us coming in on my forecast at 506. So I'm kind of comfortable with that number. The retirees, the same way, we've been at 87, 102, 100, 131. I have us coming in at 125. The ER premiums, that's basically our budgeted amount. And then the same on the admin fees and also on the HSA contribution. So I'm pretty comfortable with the numbers that I came. If anything, I think I'm a little bit conservative, which I tend to be.
But it sounds like the moral of the story is, based on your model, we're 120K light. If you went up to 250 a month, you'd be 180K light. But
if we
Having
stay
s-
at 210, we.
say 210, you're back. the other way,
Absolutely.
right? But the bottom line is that having swept all of the accounts like we just did, there's, plus or minus $400,000 that is going to be unspoken for, which can offset this negative balance comfortably.
Well, yes.
Okay, and then it becomes a question of what's left over to start the reserve into next year, but as we enter the fourth fiscal quarter, we're not in risk of running out of cash entirely, which had been a concern 3 months ago.
I feel as though we're in a much better spot today than we were when this first came up. Number one. Number two is that, we also started last year, for better or for worse, with a negative balance of 89,000.
Right, but it's subject to
This year.
then sweeping everything back into it to reset that number, but just, we're no longer in a place where we're seeing $400,000 a month in claims, which that was an unsustainable trend that was going to risk eating up every single dime of the budget. So,
Yes, and that's why we used 230. That's why we settled on using 230 because, generally at the end of the year, we might see claims with an uptick just a little bit. So it was very good to see the claims coming in at 210 this month, for the month of March.
Chris, if you were to take that old forecast 60 in the whole, and just change claims that we know, March that we know now, and then use the 230s versus the 250s, that's a swing of 100.
Yeah.
So we'd be 40 plus.
Right.
At the end. So
it's just
they both work.
far less anxiety inducing than it was 3 months ago.
Yeah.
Questions about insurance? Anything else on that stuff? No transfers that require action.
No, I do have one, I just, I want to look at it again before I bring it to the board. So it's just a technical correction to the budget, but I just want to look at it again. And then there's just the two small transfers that happen. All I have.
Thank you.
All right, just two more items. We do have an assistant principal position opening at John Reed Middle School next year with the retirement of Darlene. And we to date have received over 80 applicants for the assistant principal position. Megan has screened the applicants from 80 down to a certain number. Our goal is to continue the paper screening process with Dr. Pearson Hugo, continuing to screen those applicants to get them down to approximately 15 viable candidates, where we will then have short screening meetings via Zoom. So 10, 15 minutes just to kind of bring your resume to life, meet the candidate and so on. So we're using kind of that two-pronged approach to go from 80 applicants down to a more manageable 8 to 10 applicants to get to the committee level. And at that point, we're going to follow the same model that we used when we hired Melissa for RES, which is bringing it down to 8 candidates, having an interview committee that's comprised of faculty and staff at John Reed Middle School, myself included, Dr. Pearson Hugo, Megan, board members if they wish to be involved in the committee in that first round. And then we'll do a first round interview. We'll go from 8 to 10 candidates down to approximately 4 candidates. We'll do a second round interview that usually involves some type of performance task. And then we'll get to the third round, which is generally a kind of a meeting of board members where you get an opportunity to see the candidate before you get a chance to appoint at a board meeting. Hopefully the timeline is before the May board meeting. So the goal is to streamline down to a manageable level before April vacation, and then to really identify first round committee when we get back from April break. So that's an update on the hiring process for the assistant principal.
I think I would suggest that once you have that calendar, you can circulate that calendar to the board. And at that point, if anybody is interested and available and being part of that first screening piece, we can fill that in based on availability.
Okay. The second item update I have for you is that we've been talking about I've been talking about the idea of strategic planning during the budget process since January, that in order to plan for a budget, not just this year, but in the next 3 to 5 years, we need to have a strategic plan that identifies our priorities so that we could really encumber money for investments in the future, because each year we're responding to kind of the fiscal challenges in one particular year, whether they're transportation, utilities, special education, health, medical benefits, and so on. So we really have a small amount of money to play with each year. And so therefore those investments are really important. So I've been talking about this, developing a strategic planning process. We started a first round of that at RES this week, where we held a focus group of RES. There's another focus group that we're scheduled to hold with faculty over at John Reed Middle School. And then I'll be holding focus groups with faculties of each of the remaining 3 schools. We're collecting data. We're asking faculty right now three questions. One is, what does the ideal school look like? What skills and dispositions do graduates need to be successful? And what is the next level of work? We're collecting that preliminary data in order to triangulate themes that will help inform our strategic planning. Pretty soon, I'm going to be sending out a message to the community and asking members to be involved in a steering committee that's going to help guide the triangulation of that data on the back end. And then I'll be setting some dates for some community-wide focus groups where we will be having conversations with community members as well. So just look for that information that'll be coming out to you soon. Board members will have an opportunity to participate in focus groups, and we've started the process, which is good news. The Board of Finance approved the Reading budget last night unanimously, and so we're automatically changing gears and moving straight into the strategic planning process without wasting any time. So if you have any questions about that, I'll be sending out communication soon. If you want to let me know if you're interested in being involved, just let me know. And that's all I have for administrative reports.
I think it's just great that we're talking about strategic planning and talking about education again after a budget slog. So
That's right. It's been a long 3 months, but we're shifting gears and starting to focus on kind of teaching and learning and strategic planning, which will be great.
Great.
No further administrative reports. On to discussion and possible action Item A is the recognition of not the Bonnie Spees Award, but an award for Bonnie Spees. So Dr. McKinnon?
Well, I'm actually going to turn it over to Megan for this introduction.
So I'm so excited to be here to introduce Bonnie Spees. This is my first experience with Fun for Teachers. I got this email one day saying that I had to keep it a secret that one of my teachers had won a Fun for Teachers grant, and I wasn't really that familiar with that. Read this email, and they said a backpack will be arriving in the mail, and when the backpack comes on this date, and it was the 29th, we want you to go to her classroom during this through COVID and present her with this backpack. And I remember Bonnie saying something about her proposal at the beginning of the year, and I think Bonnie was really fortunate to also have Maria Frederick in our building, and Maria Frederick had won a Fun for Teachers grant a few years back where she traveled to Africa and is actually bringing that learning back into our 7th grade social studies classroom this month. So it's really exciting for Bonnie. So I'm going to introduce Bonnie and tell you that she won a Fun for Teachers fellowship from a most prestigious award funded by the Dalio Education Foundation. She won a grant for $5,000 to travel this summer for 3 weeks in Mexico. And it's so exciting.
Thank you. I can't tell you how extremely excited I am for this opportunity. And you mentioned Maria. Maria really mentored me along with Liz Rancunis, who also had the opportunity to win a grant while she was still teaching social studies. She went to DC. One of the things I love about teaching at John Reed is it is a school that fosters teachers being learners. And we, as a community, as a faculty, take very seriously that idea that we are lifelong learners and that we bring that back to our students and hope to foster that with them. So Fun for Teachers is absolutely perfect for that. I'll be going to Mexico, as Megan said. I'm studying contemporary art with the hope of developing a network of artists that will come back via, I guess it's now not Zoom, Google Meets, but to collaborate with my students directly. I teach in a tab format, and it's very important to me that students are not copying from a culture, but instead creating their own work. So they will have an opportunity with these artists that I meet and work with in Mexico to work with my students and come up, be inspired by them, and be able to turn that into their own artwork. So I hope that after this happens, I'll be able to come back and tell you how exciting it was. Thank you.
Great. Can we get a picture?
Sure.
Okay.
Do you need a chaperone?
Several people have asked.
Am I taking the picture?
No,
Do you
you
want
could,
me to
yes.
take it?
Oh, well, no, I want you to be in the
Yeah.
picture as well.
Oh.
Yes.
So can someone else take the picture? Here's a camera here. And then Chris, now you have to hold this though.
Yeah, I'm supposed to hold this whenever I get my picture
Okay.
taken.
Okay.
And Megan,
I'm not sure that's the best backdrop.
Yeah, right, some of our art.
The art.
Teacher.
The art. Perfect. Yeah.
Well, what's that on the time? Good.
I know that.
All right, 1, 2, 3, wait.
all right, thank you. All right.
Will you be keeping like a journal or a log or something?
I will be keeping a journal and I'm hoping to keep a lot.
Yeah, that was so neat. Watch
Nesting.
And will that be shared with the students online or over the
It will
summer?
be part of my website that I share with the students. So I'm very excited because I get to take several art classes
So
with
cool.
contemporary artists while I'm there.
That's wonderful. I was just thinking.
So, congratulations one more time. And then that brings us to district climate survey. I believe it's Dr. Chris Newell.
Yes. So the purpose of my discussion with you this evening is really to remind the board of the purpose of our annual climate survey, the components of that survey, and our plan for this spring. So the climate survey purpose, this is something we do every year. And this is really born out of state legislation of 2012 to prevent bullying and support a safe and positive climate. In ER9, all 3 districts, we do a climate survey annually. And the assistant principals in each school gather together to talk about the questions, review the data at the end of the year, and then make some adjustments. Look at areas where they might need to tease out student responses, and if questions don't seem to be clearly understood by students, sometimes there are slight revisions. But the purpose of the survey generally is to gather feedback and input from students in grades 2 through 12, also all staff and all parents to support a school climate that is physically, emotionally, and intellectually safe, free from bullying, harassment, and discrimination. Additionally, as I said before, because we do this every year, we do try to track the progress of climate goals over time through the survey response data analysis. There are 5 components of the survey. 1 is safety. Those are rules and norms, sense of physical security, sense of social and emotional security. Learning focus, that's the support for learning, and then social and civic learning. Relationships, and that includes respect for diversity, social support from adults, and social support from students. Sense of place, that really relates to school connectedness and engagement, the extent to which our kids really feel connected to one another and connected to the school communities. And the physical surroundings, the cleanliness, the sense that they're in an environment that is safe and clean. And finally, the professional community, the leadership in each school and its central office, and professional relationships. So the students don't have questions about professional relationships, but certainly the staff provides us a lot of feedback in that area. So for this year, we, as a district climate committee, we very much wanted to find a survey that, that was normed, that was validated and reliable. And in our work to do that, we also surveyed the districts in our area to find out what kind of survey they use. We learned that many districts in Fairfield County, the DIRT A and DIRT B, use their own homegrown survey, just as we do. Now, the issues with using a homegrown survey is that the survey construction is not done by a statistician. So the actual construction tends to make the surveys less valid because of the way the questions are asked, because of the number of choices, and sometimes the lack of consistency in the way that the questions and responses are structured. Also, we tend to include a number of open-ended questions, which then lend themselves to a more qualitative analysis. And typically with a survey that's normed, you can't norm the open-ended responses. And so in a package survey that one would purchase, you're not going to see open-ended responses. So we looked at a particular organization, the National School Climate Organization, which is one that's used by area districts. And we were ready to move forward and recommend that we use their survey. The issue with that survey is that it's about to change. This is the last year that organization is going to be using its current question set. And their last norming study was in 2015. So we wanted to find a norm survey so that we could norm. And what we learned is that if we paid the $10,000 for that survey, and that would be across all 3 districts, we would not be able to compare to norms either locally or nationally. So that was really a disappointment. So with that in mind, we plan to stick with our current internal survey, recognizing that it's certainly not perfect. And we look forward to making the following content revisions. We're going to obviously remove the questions about distance learning, yay, and some of the low response open-ended questions. At the middle school level in particular, there's a question about what's best about school. Let's say as an example where kids tend to say friends or PE. And the committee found that they didn't have a lot, they couldn't take a lot of action on the basis of those responses. So those have been removed. We did keep it at the elementary level. And we've also eliminated, there were a couple of questions that asked students to make inferences about someone else's experience. So for instance, my parents feel welcome in my school, or I think that other children feel X, Y, and Z. We removed those because how can anyone possibly infer what someone else is feeling? And we have added questions regarding race. We realized there was not a race question at the middle school or elementary school level, and we have added a question about the physical environment and the cleanliness of the school environment. We've added additional open-ended responses. So knowing that because we're going to have our internally created survey, we thought, well, this is an opportunity. We're going to do a qualitative analysis of the responses, and this will provide a greater opportunity for students to really tell us more about their experiences. So for instance, if a student says, I don't feel safe in a particular environment, so it could be the bus, it could be the classroom, it could be the lunchroom, it could be the bathroom, there'll be an opportunity for the students to explain why. And that will really help us. So as the assistant principals explained to me, oftentimes they'll break down the survey responses by grade level and then talk to the fourth graders as a group and say, you know, we noticed that a number of you are saying you don't feel comfortable on the playground. What can we do about that? If anyone wants to join in a conversation with me to help improve our playground, then, you know, we're going to meet on this day, whatever it might be. So really get the kids involved so that they can participate in the process. We're going to revise questions that include two terms, such as bus rides are safe and positive. Students are kind and respectful, knowing that those terms have different meanings. And at the elementary level in particular, kids have struggled understanding what respect means. It sounds very obvious to us, but actually young children don't necessarily understand what respect means. So in some cases, that's been replaced by showing kindness, which is a little bit easier for young children to understand. And I think they left one with respecting because that's one of their climate goals this year, which is to teach children what it means to be respectful. And then also to revise the response options to use a more consistent Likert scale. So on last year's survey, as an example, there were some that had 4 response options, some with 5, some with 10. And that just makes the analysis a little bit trickier. So we're going to try and have a more common number of responses. This year's climate survey will have improved security. I will say that we've done this climate survey since probably 2012. We've never had an issue with security with the climate survey. We know that we had an issue last year with a DEI survey. That was a 1-year survey experience. But taking that experience into consideration, there are things that we can do to improve the security for the parent survey and the staff survey. We will continue to invite an external consultant to do a statistical analysis and also help us. If we're going to continue doing our own internal analysis, then we can certainly be guided by an expert in that area. And that's our plan for this year. I'm happy to take any questions.
I have 2 questions.
Mm-hmm.
The survey's been conducted since 2012. What can you tell me about what has transpired since then?
Sure. So in the beginning of our survey implementation, the state required many questions. And that's fallen off a little bit over the years. But again, this is really about how to prevent bullying. One of the things that we feel very strongly about is whether students have a trusted adult in the school community. And so that was a question, and I shared this example last night in another meeting as well. We would want 100% of our students to say that there is at least one trusted adult in the school community to whom they can turn and share any concerns. And we have not had 100%. So that's an example of an item that where, based on the analysis of the responses, the school climate team then sits down with teachers, they sit down with children, and they figure out how can we improve this. And one of the ways is to help children feel connected to more adults in the building. Well, how do you do that? You invite more adults into the classroom so that the students, let's say at the elementary level, don't only feel connected to the homeroom teacher, but they also see, let's use the nurse as an example. The nurse's office is a place I can go and I feel safe. And that's the stable person who's always going to be there. Some students really find great comfort in the front office staff, that, you know, the warm smile from the person who greets me in the morning. In other cases, it might be a special area teacher. So that's an example of something where we took action based on the results of the climate survey, and we've seen certainly improvement over the years and things that have been lasting. So for instance, when we hire new staff, a lot of times bulletin boards are created to introduce the school community to new staff and help kids feel more connected. Another example could be the sense of student safety in particular areas of the building. And so we'll use the playground as an example. And for that example, that's a time when kids can really be actively involved in the process, where we'll gather together, whether it's a student government group or at the elementary level, it's more of a climate or I don't know what the council is called now. We haven't even, Melissa, you may not even know. What is it, the caring? It was the caring council when I was the principal of RES. So those kids might gather together and talk about, well, how can we make sure that kids feel like they have a buddy on the playground? And so over the years, we've purchased special benches, buddy benches, so that kids say, if I see someone all by themselves, I'm going to go over and be their buddy. And it's actions like those that really make.
So were there identifiable problems that have been addressed though? I mean, I just don't see, and I could be wrong, 'cause I'm 10th school, but I just don't see bullying as a problem, but.
Right, so it depends how you define problem, right? So were we seeing aggressive or physical behavior? No, not on a regular basis, but when students perceive a space as not being socially, emotionally inviting, or where they feel as if they don't want to take a risk to go try a new piece of playground equipment, or they don't feel as if they can venture away from the one close friend, then that's something that we want to support. And it's not, you know, it's not a critical operational thing that's going to prevent school from rolling forward every day, but we want our students, especially as they move through the grades at the elementary level, to have that foundation of feeling as good about themselves and about the learning environment as possible, so that they take those healthy risks. And then when they move to middle school and they're developing more independence and, you know, sort of spreading their wings a little bit more, they're doing so with a sense of trust and a sense of safety in the community.
Bullying is very secretive too. It's not happening when you're a kid. You don't know what's happening, and you just don't. I mean, I'm somebody who's bullied in high school. I know all about it. So I think it's something that I think that survey is a good thing in a way.
Yeah.
Some do, only the ones that are involved. I think
Yeah,
it's,
bullying can be extremely, students and in particular females can bully with a look. And it's quite powerful for those who are on the receiving end. And so while we might have a memory of, oh, the bully, that's the kid that pushed kids down, that's probably rarely the form that it takes. Sometimes it's unkind, even cruel behavior on social media. Sometimes it's a group of kids all staring at one person in a way that makes them the target. And so that's where, you know, you heard about talking about upstanders in advisory class. We teach kids, how do you be that person that's going to befriend the person who's all by themselves, or be an upstander when you see someone being treated unkindly? And it's such an important part of it.
Think you've seen an improvement over the 10 years?
I do.
Yeah.
I really do. I've loved seeing our kids get more actively involved in the process. So you think about.
I mean, they've been seeing the survey, you know, if you were first grade, you know, they're in 10th grade now, right? You know, the ones that took it the first time.
Yeah. Well, so when I meet with the school climate committee leads, our assistant principals, we meet on a monthly basis, I hear about the activities, and the climate committee at the high school is almost entirely student run. It's absolutely the kids saying, this is what we've identified as an issue, and in our high school right now, stress is the #1 issue. Stress and anxiety.
how long are the surveys?
They vary. So Elementary school survey is about 26 questions. The middle school survey is in the 30s, 34, it looks like, and the high school survey is too long. We're not turning it back. It's almost twice the length.
Okay.
It needs to be cut back. And so part of our work is really looking at what categories questions fit into, and then saying, we've asked enough questions in that area.
Does the board review it before it goes out?
No, they don't, but you will have, so when parents receive the listserv, there's a link, and so parents can read all the questions. And certainly if someone felt strongly they didn't want their children to participate.
Oh, sure. I'm asking, this is what I do for work.
Yeah.
So I was curious, but.
The board has not historically approved question by question.
I was just curious.
Yeah, cool.
I think it's because it's covered under the umbrella of our Safe School Climate Plan, and that, we're required to provide a survey. And a percentage of those questions are questions the state asked us to ask concerning bullying.
Are there any plans to go to an every other year model? I think you mentioned last night that that was the.
Yeah, I learned of one district in our area that surveys every other year. Another district surveys twice a year.
Seems excessive.
Yeah.
Well, they probably do that for pre and post and spring versus fall.
Yeah, I can't see doing every other year. So the parent survey responses feed into, are captured in our evaluation plan. So the building and the district leadership has a responsibility in the analysis of the parent survey responses to then bake that in to our action plan for how we are going to improve relationships with parents, communication, and that sense of community.
Another comment on the overtime, what's changed? The second step curriculum has come in since we've started doing the survey, right?
It has.
I think that sort of dovetails into the improvements of the climate also.
Common language, I think that's made a big difference. So for many years, the lessons around, how do you solve a problem when you're having an argument with a friend? How are the ways that you could resolve a disagreement? Since we implemented the second step, which is a social emotional learning program, which includes one lesson a week, it gives kids common language that's built upon every year. And so that's really helpful, because then when they come from grade to grade, they don't have to learn the language that might be unique to one teacher's classroom.
So that's a class that students take?
It's not a class so much as it's just a part of at the elementary level, it's just part of the teacher's responsibility. A weekly lesson takes probably 20 to 30 minutes. Social problem solving, perseverance, that type of thing. And then the middle school level, it's part of their health class.
John, you had two questions, right? Did you get both of them?
Yeah, no, thank you. In terms of moving to another survey, I can certainly understand and see the benefit of a more quantitative opposed to qualitative, but there has to be some benefit for qualitative as well. Some of those open-ended questions I would think have actually some more value than some of the less ones, that are not open-ended, because you can get a better picture of what, area might be what's good.
True.
It's absolutely a trade-off, right?
Yeah.
So we have heard from some parents that we want to have a voice to provide feedback, and we want our students to have a voice. And when kids take questionnaires or surveys, anything with a multiple choice, there can be a tendency to read things a little less carefully, especially if they get survey fatigue as they get towards the end of the survey. But when there are open-ended questions, the hope is that it will feel more personalized. So it's more work on the part of the person who's doing the analysis, but we see value in it. And frankly, I don't think that the district team would have even considered going to an outside survey if it weren't for the many questions about the survey last year.
And the surveys are anonymous? Like there's no name on it?
There's no name. They're anonymous.
Thank you, Stefan.
One more. Were your challenges from 10 years ago the same as, or similar to what the challenges are today? I mean, social media's been with us the whole time. I'm not sure with this level of intensity.
Yeah, not to the same extent. So I joined RES in 2007. And at that time, one of the things that we did in those first few years is that we adopted a program that had consistent expectations in all of the common environments, because we found that the sense of classroom safety, respect, kindness was very much the art and design of each individual teacher. And we had more difficulty in the cafeteria and on the playground in places where there was no teacher in charge necessarily, right? You have paraprofessionals who are working very hard, but the students would push boundaries. And we really wanted the kids to have a sense of whole school. So at that time, at the elementary level, and really the same work was done at the middle school under the previous administration, we brought the students together on a more regular basis to sort of make it clear that this is about all of us. We are all in this together. This is our community. What do we all believe? How do we take care of ourselves? How do we take care of others? How do we take care of this place? And that's really stayed with us for over a decade because it's so simple and straightforward. And so that's a real change that I've seen, I think, over the years. I think that we have challenges now that we didn't have 10, 15 years ago, and social media is the number one. Very hard for kids to unplug, and in some cases, very hard for parents to say no, to say this isn't right for our family. Taking the phone away, you don't need to sleep with it. I think it's hard to be a parent now. It's not so easy to be a kid all the time either.
Does the survey ask, do you have a device, do you use social media, do you identify all of that?
At the elementary level, no, it's not. At the middle school level, we were having conversations about whether to ask students about the amount of sleep they get every night, but it doesn't really fall into a category that the survey should include. So I think that could be something that we can address through advisory classes, not necessarily in the survey.
Thank you, Stephanie. That brings us to item 6C, which is facilities update, which is a broad topic, but last Wednesday, the facilities committee had a 3.5-hour walkthrough of this building and RES, which was eye-opening in a lot of ways, I think. I don't know if Mike or Mike, if you want to.
From the roof to the basement, right? It was eye-opening. We looked at, I mean, it seems some of the more urgent problems were the roof repairs that were needed here because there's little leaks all over the place, upstairs especially. Alarm updates that were needed. Yeah, the alarm is old. The paved playground at RES. Opportunities for improvements in the JRMS library. That was very interesting there. The underused room there at the back of the library here. Layout challenges at RES. Looked at the boilers again. Basement leaks. Storage or lack of storage, or maybe just too much stuff. That's all one category. The windows. So, I mean, I left there with there being just a few smaller things that need to be done in the short term, which were those roof repairs, alarm updates, and the playground. Maybe those improvements at the back of the JRMS library.
The blacktop? Not the playground,
Yeah.
blacktop.
I meant
the paved.
With the basketball hoops that has the cracks in it.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. But the playground's fine, or that is?
Oh, no, I meant that paved surface where the
Okay,
basketball
not
hoops
paved.
are,
Okay.
yeah. So those were kind of the 4 big things I think that need to be done in the short term, but there's a lot of thought that needs to go into some of our, the bigger, our larger assets like the roof and the boilers and, generator, the portions of the air conditioning. You would think that we've redone every single air conditioning zone in these 2 buildings, but we haven't. We still have some older zones. So, there definitely needs to be some planning there, right? And so we could maybe use some of these ARPA funds.
I think it was
those projects.
a very important first step into rehabilitating the capital plan and sort of partnering with the administration on a strategic vision for what these buildings look like, both from a nuts and bolts utilities perspective on through to a designing for education in the 21st century sense. And so I think there's a few pieces to that. One is the pure capital planning. When am I going to need a boiler? How much is it going to cost? when are we gonna need a roof? How much is it gonna cost? When do we want to be signaling to the town we're gonna need to make that ask? How is that gonna get paid for?
Some real strategy there too.
Priority one, priority two.
Right, there's a lot of strategy around that, and there's the complicating factor is in a world with rising interest rates, how much do you value the cost of money today versus the ability to defer for other reasons amongst these projects? So that's sort of one piece of it. The other is the broader strategic question, which gets into partnering with the town about the long-term use of these facilities. These buildings, town buildings, what broader, ways we collaborate and see what these buildings look like in 10, 15, 20 years. Before you make a 20-year investment in a roof, you want to make sure that you're going to use the roof for 20 years and not be doing some major rehabilitation that's going to cut into what you're doing. But that's all part of the capital planning process, which I'm glad is now gaining some momentum. And I think the goal is at the end of this month, another meeting to start putting some greater teeth into that. Of particular urgency, as I think we've all heard as board members from many constituents and anybody who has seen it, the blacktop area behind RES is an asset that is depreciated to the point of, not great to be used. Let's just say is the polite way to put it. And I know that Mike, 2 years ago, I think you had gotten some bids and you got a new proposal now after our meeting to get an understanding of what this would cost, with the expectation that we could bring this forward for funding either directly to the town or likely through the ARPA working group to recommend that as part of the use of the ARPA funds. Do you want to tell us a little bit of what the bid came back at?
Yeah, sure. And actually, considering the old days on there.
I printed that today.
Right. I think it's actually 3 years old. The price only went up about 10%, which I was surprised. So there we are. It's about $35,000 to repave that rectangular area, completely reclaim the asphalt, repave, and put in a small road over to the parking lot so that the folks that work here at the facility, the janitors or whoever plows, can actually come in and plow that for us during the winter. We, would like it plowed during the winter because I think students go out there when we have a fire drill, right? So they want to empty out onto the plowing surface.
And in a COVID environment, they're trying to get out every single day unless it's frigid, so.
Right. So, that's all the asphalt and excavation work for around 35. Then there would be some fencing work involved to create a space where the truck could get through the fence, either an opening with a chain or a slide gate. Put a $5,000 placeholder on that, and it's a $40,000 project.
Well, that's with the correct base that we talked about, right?
Yep.
It's grinding it all down. And
Yeah, 6-inch. Did you write the
I have
check?
a couple questions.
Not yet.
Did ADA compliance come up? in this
We actually did look at
Yes.
ADA compliance, and it, there were very gentle slopes coming from ADA compliance to go to the far playground from there. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Or the slopes from inside the building to the.
I
blacktop.
believe it's the
Blacktop.
exterior to the big playground and to the rec center.
To
Or
the
just
rec
to
center.
exit, like, because the students are traveling from RES over to the rec center for like after school programs. I don't think that there is any ADA compliant routes that way.
At the door we were standing at, you could get into the parking lot.
Right, from the kindergarten wing, you can access the parking lot.
I think that apron needs to be smoothed out. There's kind of a ledge at the end of the apron that leads on the playground, but I don't think that's what you're talking about. You're talking about a road to the rec center.
It
That
was
might
in
be a
one of-
different-
It was in one of the emails that we got.
Yeah, I think that email was, how do you get to the playground without going across the grass? I don't think there's a way that you can do that unless you come out by the music room and come in that way.
When we're saying playground here,
I'm at RES, the playground that's near the, that little garden that I put in. Wood
The
chip
big
playground, yeah,
The older kid playground at RES.
the one closest to RCC that isn't the one that's 6 months old.
No, the one that's furthest from RCC.
right,
one
that's
that
the
was-
one I'm talking
The one that was community built 3 or 4 years ago.
about. Yes.
No, Oh my gosh, sorry, this is, so they're all
There's
right next to each other.
Preschool, yeah, near the preschoolers are out there.
Laura's thinking of a different playground.
Yeah.
You're
Yes.
talking about the one that's not near the extended day program. I mean, I guess it's that, is there any
Just
way
right
to
outside
get
the
from
building.
all three playgrounds? The infant one, let's just call that the getting to RCC if you have an after-school program, to the younger kids one on campus, to the older kids one on campus. Can you get to all three of those?
No,
On a paved surface, no.
well, no, you can get there on a paved surface. I think what Laura's talking about is the new playground that's out on the corner of RCC. And so that playground there, it's accessible, but because of the grade going from RES down to the community center, it's not handicap accessible because the grade is too steep. In other words, the sidewalk is too steep a pitch. You would have to raise and make a whole gradual ramp going
Or go
from
back
one
and
side
forth.
all the way down in order to become ADA compliant. It is accessible, but not directly, so someone in a wheelchair would have difficulty because too steep a pitch to go down. I think with assistance, you could get down the steep parts, but it's not what would be deemed ADA accessible. All the other, and I think that's just because there was never a plan to go from the school to the community center. That was never part of the thought process. Everywhere else.
Now though, right?
Well, I think you're doing that for after-school programs and stuff now. You're not doing that during the school day. So that's obviously something that needs to be addressed between the school and the town. But as far as all of the playgrounds on the property of RES, they're all handicap accessible.
And then my other question was, just around ARPA funding. So is our plan just to ask for the funds for the blacktop?
So I think there's sort of two components here. One is, I think it's of high importance to get the capital plan done and brought back to the board and approved, so we have an understanding of what the long-term projections are.
Mhm.
Two is, we need to have an understanding of how we as a board want to treat the ARPA process. And I think that conventionally, when it comes to capital items, we have voted to advance them out of this board and sort of sent them to the Board of Finance for consideration, sent them to the Long Range Planning Committee, various channels.
Mhm.
I would propose that we do the same with respect to ARPA projects and basically say, just to use the blacktop as an example, that we, authorize the administration or whomever to make a request for up to $40,000, $45,000, whatever it is, of ARPA funding for the purpose of this blacktop project. That doesn't necessarily mean it's the only project that we seek ARPA funds for. I just think it's probably premature to identify those projects absent a broader,
Yeah, sure. I just want to make sure that we are making the progress towards getting that in on time.
right. And I think that if we go forward and approve seeking ARPA funding for this, it can be brought to the ARPA committee as early as its next meeting, which I believe is next Thursday.
Mhm.
And that would put it into the pipeline for this quarter's projects, which would be in line to be approved in the June, July timeframe.
I would get it as soon as you can. 'Cause
Yeah, I just, because where I'm getting at is that we've got like $2.7 million and there are a lot of people asking for a lot of money around town.
Yeah, but
And what you don't ask for, you don't get.
So
I mean, I
just,
know you're on the committee.
right, just to sort of to clarify the process a little bit, the way that the process has been designed is that sponsors of projects will come forward and there'll be presentations on a bi-weekly basis for April, May, June. At the end of that quarterly period, the working group will vote up or down each of those projects and then send those as a package onto the selectmen, who will then decide which of those they want to approve, which will then go on to a town meeting to approve. That's the general trajectory. So it's not as if there is no great difference between a project that is presented next week and a month from now with respect to their consideration and the timeline in which they will be funded.
So, but we are planning to, I mean, it's possible to get something additional in a month from now?
Correct. And it will be in the same quarterly review
Yeah.
period.
Okay.
wants to raise money for any of these types of things, like a community? The playground was built,
The one over
kindergarten
there.
Playground, what?
The one over there.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the
why you
kindergarten
guys are
playground, I
confused.
think they. the
That was totally
PTA
fundraised.
Fundraised and built that like 3 years ago. Just a question, I didn't know if it was something that maybe, yeah.
It becomes sort of a fine line between, we can't fundraise for a roof, but we can fundraise for a playground, because it's a question of what's a sort of structural issue. And I think Mike has a comment about fundraising.
No, I was just gonna say again, I serve at the behest of the board as a committee member, but it might be something that you might want to give consideration to, again, recognizing the extreme need for doing this playground in the near future, given its health and safety aspects. And that even though the plan is to put it into the ARPA pipeline, again, I apologize, I had another meeting and I didn't get to the Board of Finance meeting, but I know they asked whether there was any capital projects that were coming down, and I think they were mostly concerned about large-scale roofs and things like that. And I know they approved the $800,000 pickleball first. So I think that it's reasonable for them to understand that this is a pressing need, and you could always consider putting that in the pipeline to be done. If ARPA funding comes in to reimburse it, fine. If it doesn't, the board may need to go to the town and seek additional revenue, funding, just so that you can guarantee that it gets done this summer. My fear is that if we wait until July and they say, yes, you can have the money in July, and we try to get a site contract and they say, we're booked until next year. So I think, knowing that this is something that is an urgent need, we may want to consider it.
I think you sort of jumped something that I was going to suggest once we got to a motion here, which was that the motion be for ARPA funding or other financial avenues, so that we presented both to the Board of Finance and the ARPA committee sort of in tandem, so that the smoothest funding mechanism can prevail through that.
Right, but again, it's expressing the intent that it's getting done this summer. rather
Correct. And the other piece that I raised last night at the Board of Finance was the question of whether or not there's a potential for an economy of scale with respect to the pickleball and still the tennis court rehabilitation project, and whether or not there is overlap with that contractor helping us with the blacktop.
Post-tension concrete form out there the last 30 years. Do you want?
That- It might change Mike's bid by a factor of 0, but that's
Yeah, just a little bit.
Didn't the town just lose a court case with?
not a ridge.
Yeah, no, Ridge. But like, that money was like completely the same as the funds.
The ARPA funds,
Yeah,
close.
very
It's
close.
about the same amount.
Yeah.
What's the
I don't think you
sum?
can use it for that.
No, I thought that that's what they would end up doing.
They can't.
One more thing on the blacktop before we leave it, or before we put it to bed, or whatever the
Whatever
plan
next
is.
thing is.
Yeah, I'm looking at an overhead of RES on a computer. I know you can't see it from very far away, but you've got a playground, they're all over the place. Here's the blacktop area that we're talking about here. If you did want to put pathways between those areas, now would be the time. If you're gonna do asphalt work here,
If you're gonna asphalt, you
Let's
asphalt,
get it
you're
all done.
asphalting. That's-
right, let's get it all done. So if there is a specific ask, let's maybe revise that and add it in.
Why don't we just add in something like, to a review for ADA compliance and then adjust if necessary?
It sounds like the ask would be for recreational concrete and appropriate accessibility, and appropriate access to the same, basically.
In addition to that,
Well, why is the grass area not ADA compliant? It's level.
I don't know that for
grass
sure.
area. I think it's.
I mean, I think it would be nice just to get an assessment of it, and if it's deemed accessible, then we don't have to do anything.
Right, I don't think we're binding ourselves to, let's put in an asphalt walkway between the
Right.
playgrounds. I think that it is an area that we should, ensure somebody investigates and make sure that it is fine, and it may very well be.
We did that prior to all the installations of those playgrounds. They're accessible. They have to be state law. So,
I guess one of the questions is, there's a difference between being accessible and being interoperable with their accessibility, because it's one thing to say, I can get from the playground if I'm here, but I've got to go all the way around the school to get to the other one, versus there's a way to connect the two. That's, and I don't know the answer to that question.
yeah, no, I mean, again, you could look at that.
Right, it's,
Putting walkways between doesn't really solve the issue, because, again, like you said, if the grade, I'm pretty sure it's pretty flat, and so you can go from one playground to the other playground on the grass with no problem. Putting a paved walkway just gives you a paved walkway. It doesn't change the grade unless you're talking about building it up, and
but it gives
then
you,
you're gonna have trouble with mowing and all.
it gives you
that stuff.
wintertime access you wouldn't have otherwise.
I guess if you,
Oh, yeah.
If you ran the snow blower on it.
yeah, you could run the snow blower over the grass.
I mean, I don't think there's any harm in just looking into it. It's part of our.
I think
Or just
both
giving that flexibility.
parties are right, I think that they're accessible from certain locations, but in between each other, maybe work. If students are going in between.
I mean, you probably can't go from the blacktop to the big playground in a wheelchair in the middle of winter. Right.
I would just say that you have a shovel-ready project ready to go, and the clock's ticking on ARPA funds, and there's a lot of steps that you may need committee-wise and town approval-wise. I think everyone agrees that this project needs to be done. You've got a quote. I think you should push this through, and either look at ARPA, look at the facilities.
Right. Don't overthink it. Let's get a
Yeah,
motion,
and
let's move on.
Right, I would, and I'd be careful about doing an ADA compliance of anything, because you bring one thing up to code, you bring this up to code, you have to bring everything, right? So unless I hear your concerns about getting down to the rec center with the slope of the grade, but I think that's a separate project or a separate study. So
Yeah.
That we should look at, and I don't know whose responsibility that would be, actually.
That's tricky, yeah.
Right?
Park
Like,
and Rec,
it's
town,
market
actually.
schools.
Right.
What's
It would all-
that?
it would all the town.
That's a town program, we have school programs, town program.
Right.
It used to be held here at RES in that building there. And so there was never an issue with going from the school to the playground.
Was that a
was all
COVID-related
fine.
change?
No, they're running out, so I think it's a mix, but it's not just extended day. I mean, they also do like basketball, you have karate, there's all kinds of.
There are lots
other
of
programs.
town-sponsored programs that are down the hill. And I think Mike's point is it's a town program
Yeah,
on town property.
Right.
that's
After school hours.
After school hours.
So we need some kind of motion on this?
Yes. I would suggest
That sounds like-
a motion to approve, to authorize the administration to. I want to make sure we're covering the ARPA side and the town side. So you would approve the project, and then you would authorize the administration to submit a proposal to the ARPA working group and or the town of Reading for funding.
Yeah.
That sound right?
yeah. Can you make the motion? Or do you want-
We should write it. But, do you want to put a dollar amount of $50,000, or? I don't know whether we'd have to get more than one quote.
No dollar.
No,
No,
not
no.
for our part.
Because you don't know, you get one bid right now.
Yeah.
So not just one.
Okay.
Right. We'll need to tell the ARPA working group what we think it's worth, but that's a different issue. What are we calling this space?
The RES blacktop?
But existing basketball area,
Rear
approximately
recreation
7,000.
area.
I would say the paved recreation area is kind of the,
Yeah, the airplane recreation in the back of the school.
is that nobody is confused, that's a parking lot.
That's today's date. Today's bid. Same number.
It's today's bid, he updated it.
Oh, he updated it.
Yeah, yeah, about 10%, so that's the new number.
Okay.
So it's a motion to approve the resurfacing of the RES paved recreation area and authorize the administration to submit a proposal to the ARPA working group and or the town of Reading for funding. Mike just made that motion. Second floor. All right, any discussion? All make sense? All in favor? Good, motion carried unanimously.
Okay.
Which is
good
nice.
to know.
Service that Chris offers sometimes.
Yeah.
I don't charge extra. Any other comments on facilities before we move off of
Is there a next meeting on the calendar?
that? I believe April 30th has been floated for 7:30 a.m.
I thought it was the 20th.
Maybe not. I'll
Are
check.
you posting the findings, in regarding the walkthrough and the different, in other words, enlightening the rest of the community about how bad these particular issues are at schools, facilities?
I don't
So
know.
people are aware.
I wouldn't say it's posting, the minutes of the walkthrough would be posted in the normal course. They're not going to be particularly detailed, but I think once we get to the approval of the capital plan in a meeting here, I think there'll be a more detailed review of what's going on, and it'll help with that side of it.
I have a Wednesday, April 20th, 7:30, but it says tentative, so we
I
might
think it was
still be
waiting,
checking.
I think it was waiting on a
I
quorum.
have that as well.
Did you have that, Mike?
Yes, 20th, 30th. Yeah, 20th. I'm just glad that after a few sort of false starts, we were able to have that meeting and start really focusing on this. It's important work, and while the buildings were shuttered for COVID, a lot of it fell by the wayside, and now that everyone's back in the buildings, we're able to really kick the tires and stuff. We can help build a real growth.
One more thing before we leave facilities, are we all set with the repairs that need to be done on the roof here to help with our leaks?
Well, they're in next year's budget for $8,200. The question becomes whether there's funds available in this year's budget or not. And 2 months ago, I would have told you no.
But it looks like they're there, minus the fact that you just kind of captured some of that for the surplus.
I recommend, we talked about.
I don't
we
have
talked
the
about
answer
this
to that,
recently.
'cause
Yeah.
the answer to today, Mark.
Yeah, I think things are we're in a much stronger position. I think that we could probably work on scheduling someone. I would love to get them in July, use
Use the summer to get it all cleaned up.
use
Use
summer,
next year's funds,
use
but
next year's funds,
get it
use
on
the
the
summer, but
schedule
schedule it
so
now.
we can stop with the buckets.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the message we sent today, because that was a question. There was an email today asking just what you just asked. and
I think it was a great.
we asked if they could hold it.
I
And
have-
also that the weather was getting warmer and hopefully it would expand a little bit with that.
And I think normally, I think that would be a great strategy.
Does that cover all, I think you said there were 4 immediate needs? Are they all?
Roof repairs,
Just the
alarm
alarm.
updates is a bigger job that would be part of the capital plan. The paved playground is what we just talked about. What about your ideas for the back of the library? That's, you know, it's like an instructional supplies.
Unused space
type thing.
or?
The goal really is to take the existing capital improvement plan from 2020-ish, to look at data from our most recent walkthrough and to take, these 10 or so items and to put them on a calendar to say, when do we feel like these projects need to be completed in, over the next year or the next 3 to 5 years, and then to identify, what priority level. So the roof, we thought, was a priority. We need to take care of this immediately, but after going up there, we thought we could take care of it with some flashing and some minor repairs, which is in next year's budget. So that means we might be able to put it in 2023, 2024, and put it as a priority one, but move it where, you know, at appropriate time. And then it's just a matter of moving the other 10 or so items into the plan.
Because we're gonna need to do some investigating on the boiler issue at RES and
Yep.
how we want to address that aging piece of infrastructure.
Keep hearing about this boiler.
I'll send you a picture.
There's two of them. One of them looks like something out of a horror movie.
It's not a good sign when you're in the basement, and you see the parts of the old boiler, and that's what we used to repair this one.
Yeah, and a piece of equipment that big that does have duct tape involved.
Get some
For real.
kids there for creative writing.
So,
Monster in the
yeah,
basement.
turn the lights off. Though.
So if there are no other comments on facilities, we'd certainly invite anybody interested to the April 20th meeting to talk further about that. I don't think that'll be a walking discussion. That's probably going to be a Zoom meeting. We'll turn to item 7, which is board committee reports. Any reports from committees?
I can give a brief update on the DEI committee.
Sure.
We met last night. We reviewed some details from the climate survey with the lens of diversity markers. And I think that it's safe to say that the data wasn't really structured in a way that we were able to come up with any meaningful insights. That's not to say, I don't want to say that there aren't meaningful insights, we just didn't have that in the data. And then we talked a lot about moving away from quantitative surveys and trying to get a better look at, you know, qualitative aspects of the topic and do more things like focus groups, or rather pull information from focus groups and talk about it that way. Did I cover?
You did. I mean, I think that the conversation, there was a request to have a statistical analysis, and I think that the committee felt strongly that when it was saying that the results were not statistically significant, it doesn't mean that the perceptions of a small group are not important and significant, but mathematically speaking, the results were not significant.
Yeah, so we'll aim to go in a different direction this year. I think we also recognize that last year, the survey caused a lot of turmoil within the communities. And so I think everyone was sort of in agreement that we want to address this in a way that makes things easier rather than harder too. And then we talked a little bit about the climate survey, but we talked about that today.
Thank you, Laura. The policy committee is working through the shipment and goodwill model policies and anticipates having recommendations for wholesale updates. Rob, it would be aggressive to say this time next month, but it's possible.
I wanted to ask about that. Would it, are the policies available for us to review now in just in the interest of knowing what we're talking about? When you guys
Yes,
come to us and ask
anybody
for it?
who is interested can let me know, and I can share with you the folder of the shipment model policies that we're working through, just so you can kind of see what.
Okay,
available.
I'd be interested, just
Meaning
so when you.
too large to email.
Oh, I'm not emailing them.
Yeah.
Everything's living in the Google version.
Okay, but I assume you guys are gonna come to us eventually to approve them, so.
Right, there'll be a broad discussion as to the methodology behind the madness. So.
Okay, yeah.
There are no further committee reports, and there's no additional business on the agenda. We'll look for a motion to adjourn. Laura, Mike, all in favor? We are adjourned at 8:41 p.m. Thank you, everybody.